So we talk a lot about success. Everybody, I think a lot of people have different ideas of what success actually is. It's a lot of different images that come to mind when it comes to success. So I know Khalil's got some questions to kind of start with, but I'm going to kind of switch it around a little bit and ask Khalil a couple of questions. But here's the thing. He's smiling because he didn't know I was going to do that. But we live in a world where success can have many different images. Whenever you think of success, you may think of a particular person, a particular image. And I think, especially with younger people and older people alike, I think we can view success through a lens of what maybe social media presents to us, different avenues. What do you think about that, Khalil, as far as what I just said, as far as how success is portrayed through social media and through entertainment?
Yeah, I think you're spot on. I think what social media has done is kind of like, I don't know, I guess commoditize success. Like it's very success is looked at as it's carnal, you know what I mean?
Right.
It's has everything to do with image, has everything to do with money. But I think there's a lot of those intangibles that we kind of all have that are just more fulfilling that it's kind of hard to, I guess, give image to on social media. It's not as click worthy. It doesn't get as many shares and things like that. But I'm thinking of concepts like family or a healthy marriage or just freedom within or, being able to kind of be yourself in a bunch of different settings. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
those are the intangibles that I kind of value even more than I would money. Money is important. But there's an aspect of freedom there that I've always kind of that's always kind of resonated with me. But yeah, social media has a huge impact on a lot of our opinions of success for sure.
Well, one thing, and then I'll let you kind of kick us off with your questions.
Hmm.
But one thing that I've tried to do, especially in discipleship and mentorship, coaching in general, is to kind of reframe our definition and idea of success. And I want this today's conversation to be about, how do we reframe our image or our definition, if you will, of success. And so why don't you start us off with the questions that you prepared, Khalil?
Yeah, for sure. What does success mean to you personally, and how has your definition evolved over time?
So I'll start, Caitlin, on that because my view of success has definitely changed over the years. I will say this, and there's a quote that I've shared many times. I found this quote probably 7 or 8 years ago. It's an old Earl Nightingale. If you've never listened to Earl Nightingale, just go to YouTube, type in Earl Nightingale, and his stuff started in the 50s. He's probably in the personal development world, I consider him kind of the OG. He's probably he goes back way past Jim Rohn, Zig Ziglar, and all the greats. I mean, he was the original guy that just talked about attitude and personal development, self-help, all of these things that are very popular now. But he had a definition that the first time I heard it, I just fell in love with it. And I've probably quoted this more than any other thing I've ever quoted when it comes to personal development. And his definition basically said, or it said this exactly, that success is the progressive realization of a worthy ideal. Now, a lot of people have substituted that word ideal with goal, and I believe that setting goals and having goals are very, very important. I believe the Bible teaches that in pretty much every major conquest in the Old Testament, God had a plan. God had now his plan may have been different than, whoever was leading that conquest, but he had a plan and he had specific ways that he wanted things carried out. A lot of times when you read and the children of Israel were getting ready to go into battle or to conquer this nation or conquer this king, God would have a specific way. This is how you're going to do it. This is who's going with you. This is who's not going with you. And he was very specific on that. And so I believe the Bible teaches that we should have goals and we should have plans. But I do believe we should seek God's guidance and leadership with those goals and plans, because a lot of times his plans are much better and much higher than ours. And he sets the bar a lot higher most of the time than we do. But that quote helped me realize that success is not necessarily about a destination, but success is about the journey. I've got this coffee cup, Khalil. I think you bought this for me for my birthday maybe last year, but it says enjoy the journey. If we start and break that down, that success is the progressive realization of a worthy ideal. If we start with the worthy ideal and just kind of kick that idea around and say, what does that mean to have a goal that is worthy? When you put goals down on paper, you bring them alive. It becomes almost alive. And but it does not need to be a goal or an ideal that's worthy necessary, that we're worthy of. It needs to be a goal or an idea that is worthy of us, because we're going to give our lives, we're going to give our time, we're going to give our energy, we're going to sacrifice things, pretty much give our lives to this purpose in life, this goal or this idea. Now, I would say this: most people walking around today, they have no idea of what their worthy ideal is or what their goal is. But the ones who have actually started the process are way ahead. But I would submit to you with this: make sure that ideal or that goal is worthy of you. Now, when I really broke that down and started thinking about it, I realized that if that ideal was going to be worthy of me, it had to be more than just a number. It had to be more than a house, or it had to be more than a car, or it had to be more than this. It had to be two things. Number one, it had to be worthy of me giving my life for. So it had to be much bigger than just a number on a paper. I'm going to make this amount of money, or I'll be happy when I hit this. And this, I've seen a lot of self-development people and coaches say, you need to know your number. You need to know your number. Guys, I think it's much bigger than that, much bigger than a number. A number is empty, is hollow. Like you said earlier, money is very important. We have to have money. You can't you can't build orphanages or hospitals or a lot of things. Money provides health care. We have to have that. But that ideal has to be so much bigger than that. And it also has to fit within the fabric of family, fitness, faith, and finances. It has to encompass all of those different areas. And I'm definitely not trying to eliminate other areas, but when you have that worthy ideal, it has to really encompass everything, and so that's what I would say it needs to be. We need to have a goal, but it needs to be a worthy goal. And it needs to be a big goal. It needs to be a goal that makes you a little fearful, Stress should not necessarily keep you up at night as much as those goals do, and that idea. What do you think about that, Kayla?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I do think it kind of comes down to, and I think everybody learns this in their journey, is what are your true priorities, or where do those fall? Because that's a big part of it. How do you view finances, faith, or even like family relationships to you? Like, where does that fall in categories to you? And I think that's one of the things, like, you come to. I think that's what he's talking about in that quote, is that you come to realization of what's most important during that journey. You were also talking about the Bible. I thought this was interesting too, because goals. So, like, when I was teaching, you would have roadmaps that you would put in place for kids. So for their education plan for the entire year, like you basically had to have the year planned out. And they would call it a map. And so I think goals are important, but even in that quote where he's talking about a worthy ideal, it's not, I would argue it's not goals per se, because um, goals are benchmarks. We even use that term in the education world. Like once you hit this benchmark, then you're ready to move up to the next one. So that's why it's important that money, can't be the end all be all. Although, is it important? Absolutely, yes. The Bible says money answers all things. So, like you were saying, you can't build orphanages, or you can't, pay someone's light bill. That stuff's important, but it's fleeting. It's temporal. Solomon would say it's vanity. And the other problem with that is if your end all be all is a number. I've had multiple jobs, in my lifetime, and I've made really good money. I made really terrible money, and I've learned in all of those times, it's like number is just a goalpost that you keep moving. So it may be $1 million to start with, but what happens once you get to $1 million? Well, that's not enough. You got to move to the next. You got to move to the next. I love that book, Rich Dad Poor Dad. But like for people who have never read that book, you need to get it. Rich Dad Poor Dad. That book is amazing. It was almost, I guess, because I wasn't introduced to thinking like that when I was young. Dude, it was almost like revelation with finances. And he says, very, very wealthy man, Robert Kiyosaki, is that his name?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Super wealthy man. And he says that money is the trap.
Yeah.
Money is the trap. He said, I know poor people who are extremely happy, have a great life. And I know billionaires who are so unfulfilled that they're stressed and depressed all the time. And the reason why is because it's never enough. It's a bottomless pit.
I 100% agree. And we'll plug the book because I think it's a must read. I don't agree with everything that Robert Kiyosaki says.
Sure.
But, he wouldn't agree with everything I say either. And that's fine.
Right.
I would definitely say read the book. Everybody needs to read the book, because what it does is it changes your way of thinking, and the way you see the world, because most of us, and when I say us, most people see the world through the poor dad lens. And he was introduced to a totally different mindset and way of thinking, and it has gotten him where he's at. But here's what you said that is so important. And money can be the trap, and I've lived in that trap. I've been in that trap. I've been held hostage to that trap. But what I will say is this: when I look at a worthy ideal, I think of what is my ideal life? What do I want? How does that work into family? Because here's something super important, especially for married people. If you have this goal, this mindset of this worthy ideal, what would your ideal life be like? What would where would you go on vacations? Where would you do this? Where would you do that? Where do you see yourself in 10, 15 years? What is that ideal that you're living for, that you're moving for? You need to make sure two things. Number one, it's your ideal. You didn't borrow it from somebody else. Kayla and I have talked a lot about this. For a lot of years, I had this picture of success in my mind and in my head, but it was a picture that I borrowed from other people. I looked at people that I thought were successful, and I said, I want to be like that, or I want, and I see young people do this all the time. I see older people do this as well. They'll start emulating these people. Well, if I can act like him, I can have what he has, or I can be what he is, and they'll buy the car, and they'll buy the clothes, and they'll, even adopt the mannerisms. But guess what? You're giving your life to an unworthy ideal. Maybe it's worthy for him, but it's unworthy for you because it's not yours. It's borrowed, and it's impossible to be authentic. It's impossible to actually have and find fulfillment when you're chasing someone else's purpose or someone else's ideal. So I would make sure two things. Number one, it's your ideal. And number two, it's the same ideal that your spouse has, because what you want to make sure is that if you're married, when you dream, now you dream together. The Bible says that two will become one. Guess what? The dreams become one. Now, that doesn't mean you won't have individual things, and there's certain goals that my wife has that I don't, may not necessarily understand, and that's fine. But the main ideals, the main things that you're going for, you need to have be on the same path together. Because if you're on two different paths and two different journeys and seeking two different ideals, it's impossible not to grow apart. So number one, make sure it's your ideal, that it's what you really want out of life. And when you talk about, Kaylin, finances and number, this is what I can say. The ideal life for me, what I'm headed for, the journey I'm on, the purpose that I'm moving toward, it's going to require a lot of money. It's going to require finances. It's going to require abundance. But what I've, part of the declaration that I make every day, and that I say every day, I read it out loud, I write it a lot of times, is I'm so happy and grateful now that I have financial freedom. Financial freedom. So financial freedom is not tied to a number. Financial freedom is tied to a mindset. It's tied to a destiny that I'm after. And there's days I walk in that freedom, but I'm not truly where I want to be in that journey, but I'm headed there. And for me, the ideal part of that ideal, where the ideal is financial freedom. And that, because see, here's the thing, I've known people that have made more and more money every year, but become less and less free. More and more money can be more and more freedom, or it can have more and more bondage. The Bible says this: the blessing of God maketh rich, but addeth no sorrow with it. I don't know why I'm speaking in King James today, Kaylin, but
it also says, while you're saying that, unless the Lord builds the house, the builders will labor in vain. My spiritual father has a quote. He says, if you build something God didn't tell you to build, then you're going to have to be responsible for the upkeep of it. So coming back to what you were saying, I had a couple of things like I want to point out. I'm sorry if I cut you off. Like, you go ahead.
No, you're good, man. You have to cut me off from time to time.
Yeah, I got to cut him off from the KJV language. When you were talking about like a worthy ideal, like it has to be something worthy of you. I feel like there are times, there comes a point in everyone's life, man, woman, boy, or child, and it doesn't matter what area of life you feel like you are in, there comes a point to where, for me, it would be God giving me the worthy ideal, or a dream, whatever you want to call it. For other people, it might be like a dream, I guess the new lingo now is the universe gave it to me, whatever you want to call it. For me, it's God. But there comes a point where I feel like you come to the realization that you have a dream or a worthy ideal sent from a higher power than you. And what was interesting was, like, I was just doing some reading this morning. I think it's Proverbs. Sorry, y'all. I'm not flipping through my actual Bible. I had it pulled up on my phone. Proverbs 29:18, famous passage. Everybody knows this. Where there is no vision, the people are unrestrained, but happy is the man who keeps the law. So what's cool about this passage, if you actually go read it in the original Hebrew, it actually would lend itself to the idea where there is no revelation. It's the same interchangeable word for vision. Where there is no revelation, people, it in the KJV, it gives this word of unrestrained. They cast off restraint.
That's
So
right.
it's this idea that people become lawless. And I'm not saying that that's true. I'm saying that there's another meaning for it. If you study like the cultural context of that actual word in the original language, it actually means that they tend to let things go unaware. So it's not that you violently, like, I'm not going to pull my hat off because my hair is a mess, but it's not that you would take like covering or safety that you have. So for the Jewish people, they wear think it's called the huppah. They wear a hat as a covering over their head, men and women alike. But it's not this idea of like in an angry manner taking covering, safety, and security of God off and just throwing it to the ground. It's not that. It's this idea that without vision or revelation, they carelessly let it. And the problem with that is that that's when you have people who go into this downward spiral in life, man. I've done that. Everybody's done that. Like, I vividly can remember having this happen. Like, while I was finishing up my time in college, every college student goes through this probably multiple times. It's like, man, I want to major in this, but I don't really know what I'm going to do with that. I'm not going to make money. So I'm going to go for this. You waste another year or two, more money. It's like, I don't want to do that. There's no clear direction for that. And the reason why is because there has been no revelation, or there has been no vision, or as you're saying, worthy ideal. We have not come to the realization that that's what the worthy ideal is. So with that being said, that's when people spiral out of control. And honestly, it's where a lot of people waste years of their life trying to chase something that was never God's intention for them, or it was never meant to be your destination.
Could you say it like this, Kaylin? Because you said revelation. Could you say it like this? The ideal has not been revealed. It's just has not been revealed because you haven't looked for, you haven't. Yes. How many people live their entire life never even asking the question, what do I really want to do? What was I put on this earth to do? I heard a guy say this one time, and I love it. He says, we all have an individual fingerprint so that we can leave an individual, or a unique, excuse me, we all have a unique fingerprint so we can leave a unique imprint. We all have that uniqueness. We all have that thing that is to be revealed to us. I believe from God. I believe it comes from God. I believe God created us. The Bible says we're fearfully and wonderfully made for a purpose, I believe. And as we begin to seek that purpose and develop that purpose, we get that worthy ideal. And as it's revealed to us, Khalil and I have talked about this a lot, working, in a financial advisory firm. The people who have done the best financially and have financial freedom is because they set goals and they restrain themselves from anything that didn't fit in that goal. They, instead of casting off restraint where there's no vision, they have a vision. So they restrain themselves in certain areas,
Yeah. But it's also interesting too, because the second half of that same verse, it says, but he who keeps the law, happy is he.
That's right.
Now that's good old KJV language, but in the Hebrew, it says, it would actually like literally translates to blessed or fulfilled or happy is the man who keeps the word of God.
There you go.
So that's why not everybody's journey is intended to look the same, man. Not everybody's picture of success is going to be the same. You made a quote, I think you made it earlier, but I know me and you were talking a couple nights ago. You said, the trouble a lot of people get into is that we borrow someone else's picture or image of success, and we try to live by that. And the reason we get so spun out is because we're trying to live this image to fit this one, but this one was never intended for us. Your image is not intended to look the same. And a lot of the reasons we get spun out, and like that verse even says, where they let go of restraint or they lose it, you can almost say lose control, is because, and I've learned this personally, it's like we don't like the journey. We don't like the process because it's painful. You made that quote the other night, and it put me down a little rabbit trail. So like for people who don't know, like my background is in history, cultural studies, and stuff like that. So one of the most famous paintings, if you go across the world, one of the biggest, most famous pieces of artwork in the world is the what, John?
Man, let Khalil. I already know the answer, so let's see what Khalil says.
What you got, Khalil?
What you thinking of Mona Lisa?
That's what
No,
I said. That's
no,
what I said
Really?
the first time.
I
But
said
no,
one. I
you're
said
wrong.
one of the biggest ones.
One of the
One
biggest
of the
ones.
biggest paintings in the world.
Last Supper.
No, man. Oh my, we're gonna have to have art history class, y'all. So it's the Sistine Chapel.
Ah, okay, okay.
It's the Sistine Chapel. You know,
Uh-huh.
over there across the pond. Which, by the way, I do
Hmm.
need to correct myself. I said chuppah earlier for the covering for the Jewish people. It's actually kippah.
Yep.
So, for if you're Jewish and you're watching this, please forgive me. I'm sorry. Um, so I went down a rabbit trail the other night, and what was pretty interesting is if you study the history of that painting of the Sistine Chapel. So Michelangelo was a sculptor. Like that was
Right.
his niche, man. Like that was his thing. That's what he did. Like that's what he was born for up until this point in time. So he gets approached by the Pope at the time and he gets commissioned. And the Pope basically says, listen, I'm going to pay you. You really don't have an option. You're going to do the work. But what I want you to do is I want you to paint the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. And he says, when you do it, you got this huge space. This is what I want done. He says, I want you to paint portraits of the 12 apostles. And I want it to fill the whole entire, I want it to fill the whole entire ceiling of this elaborate, grand, huge, beautiful temple of God or house of God, whatever you want to call it. So Michelangelo gets into the early stages of trying to get that together, and for some reason, Michelangelo was like, "Man, I don't feel like I'm supposed to do that." Which at that time, you got to think that's pretty serious to go against the Pope, because back during those times, man, like the Pope was like, brother, he had more power basically than the king. So Michelangelo says, "I don't feel to do that. I'm going to paint what I feel to do." So he for the artwork that he was commissioned originally to do, instead he paints different scenes from the book of Genesis. So reason this is important and how I tie this into what we're talking about, man, you can buy still pictures because there's 9 different scenes, I believe it is, out of the book of Genesis that he painted. So 9 different scenes from different stories in the book of Genesis span this huge ceiling in this huge this church. You could take a still picture of one of those and hang it up in your house, but it's not going to be as valuable and as grand as the original. And the reason why, not only because of the size, because I mean, you could get still pictures of every single scene, but it's not the same thing and it's not as valuable. Here's why. Do either one of y'all know how long it took for him to paint the Sistine Chapel?
I think 5 years.
4 years.
4 years. Okay.
4 years of painstaking, even to the point to where I found some writing. So he actually wrote poems and several letters during these 4 years to his friends, where he described not only the aggravation but the physical strain on his
Yeah.
body. This man
Hmm.
said, "I have already grown a goiter from this torture." He further
Yeah.
complained and said, "My stomach is squashed under my chin. My face makes a fine floor for droppings from the pigeons. My skin hangs loose below me. My spine is knotted from folding myself over." To the point to where after all of this complaining, even during this 4 year process, Michelangelo says, he declared, "I am not a painter.
Hmm.
This is not me. This is not what I feel like my calling and purpose is." But what's crazy is through 4 years of process, pain, to the point where it permanently damages his body. Like he left that project, went back to sculpting, but had permanent neck injury and shoulder injury. I mean, this brother's standing on scaffolding for 4 years doing this
Yeah.
for hours on hours on hours throughout the day for 4 complete years. But in that pain and in that process, it produces one of the most world-renowned, beautiful artworks in the world. And what's even cool, I thought this was interesting, talking about a worthy ideal, is that if you look at the most famous scene in the painting was the creation of Adam. So you have this whole picture where you have apparently God is an old white man with a beard, and he's held up by little white angels. Um, and you got the famous the
Yeah.
almost touching of the points. What's interesting, Michelangelo kind of hid this in that imagery, is that it's God creating Adam in this picture, but God, if you look at the backdrop of God, it's inside of the picture of a brain.
Wow.
So I say all that to say it's interesting because there's another passage. I was going to bring it up because it ties into 29 and 18. Habakkuk 2:2. Write down the revelation and make it plain so that whoever reads it may run with it. So Michelangelo paints this thing through process pain, this huge masterpiece that no one else can copy, puts him on the map. It's world renowned for Michelangelo, even though it's something he thought, like, this is not me, this is not what I'm originally called to do. It branches off this whole new niche for him to where now he also painted. He didn't just sculpt. But the other thing that's cool about that is that he gives us this imagery now that has actually become a lot of discussion for psychologists, spiritual people, to where they even look at this idea of where is it God is touching humanity, and sometimes we overlook it and we make it so out there and like far away from us because we don't think that God is here with us. And a lot of times he's right here. And he's trying to give you the image of that worthy ideal. But a lot of times we overlook it for something else.
Yeah, and I think it's clear to see that, you know, in what he did. Kind of go back to what you said. Two things stuck out about what you said, more than two, but the main two is, number one, I'm going to do this, but it's going to be my picture of success. It's not going to be this or that. This is what I'm going to do. This is the vision I have. If you want me, this is what you're going to get. And I think that's a big thing, because a lot of times a worthy ideal. Yeah, because see, a lot of times we get pigeonholed. One thing that society does is it puts us in boxes. I hate boxes. I hate labels. I hate this. Anything that has to do with a box or a label, because we're individually made. We are different. Every one of us on this Zoom or on this podcast, we're three different people. You know, you can look at us and tell we represent, you know, three different age groups. There's a lot of things different about us. But society tries to put us in a box. We're Republican, or we're Democrat, or we're independent. You know, you got to fit in one of those three boxes. Well, maybe I don't agree with any of the parties in everything, but I agree with, you know, it's just always a box. And the same thing with religion. You know, you have to, if you're going to be a religious person, you got to, well, I got to know what camp you're from. I got to know what box you're from. You know, what I think a lot of times is the more spiritual we get, the more all those lines get blurred somewhat. Now, I'm not saying you don't need to know and have beliefs and core values and all that. I'm not saying everything needs to be blurry. This entire podcast is about focusing in on a worthy ideal. But what I would say is this: if you get me and you want me, then you want the best of me. You want my dreams. You want my visions. You want my goals. You want the things that make me different. You want the best of me. And I think that's the thing with the painter. You know, I'll do the job and I'll give the next 4 or 5 years to this. But if you want me, this is what you're going to get. And I think we have to be unapologetical about that. Now, we've got to, you know, there's authorities God puts in our lives, and we need to do as we're told on certain things. And there's times your vision is going to fall under someone else's vision. But we need to put ourselves in positions and places where my worthy ideal can align with your worthy ideal. I think a lot of times we get frustrated in life because we attach ourselves. You know, I said this last week, but it bears repeating. You know, our alignments need to be connected to our assignments, and that assignment is that worthy ideal. What we are, what we are put on this earth to accomplish. Therefore, the alignments in our lives, the jobs we take, the spouse we choose, the friends we associate, all of those alignments need to be chosen with that worthy ideal in mind, And the next thing I'd say about that beautiful story that I never knew a lot of that was there was a lot of pain in the process. Even if you've got the goal, even if you've got the vision, it's bigger than the goal, as Kaylin said, but even if you've got the worthy ideal in mind, there's still going to be some pain in the process. There's still going to be process that we have to walk through that may not necessarily be fun and may even cause us to doubt, are we even a painter? I think he said it, I'm not a painter. Obviously, he's wrong. He's one of the most famous, revered painters ever, but we can doubt ourselves during the process. But he started something and he finished something. And that's the thing, with having that worthy deal in what they know. Khalil, how far off from all of our questions are we now?
No, I mean, that was a perfect segue because I think what you spoke to was just kind of like that balance of the worthy ideal, but also the practical realities. Like there is a necessity to us kind of learning how to balance that. So the question that we're on now is, how do you balance pursuing your worthy ideal with the practical realities of life, such as financial responsibilities and societal expectations?
Yeah, balance to me is a hard word, and I don't always like the word balance. I think it's almost impossible to find balance. What makes a seesaw fun? Every Sunday at church, the church we attend has a school as well, and my daughter likes to go play just 10-15 minutes on the playground, and it kind of took me back. It's been a long time ago, but what makes a seesaw fun are the ups and downs, the fact that it's not balanced. And I think with life, if what you're seeking is balance, I think you're going to always come up short. But what I will say is this: when I think of a worthy ideal, again, it's got to be more than a number. It's got to be more than a car or a house. I'm going to tell you this, there are symbols of success. For me, a symbol of success is not necessarily caught up in I don't want to say it's not. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that symbols of success for me are not materialistic, because they are. I like nice things. I like to eat nice food. I like to go to nice places. I like to wear nice clothes. I like to drive nice vehicles and live in a nice house. All of those things are true for me. But bigger than that and beyond that, symbols of success for me is on Sunday morning, sitting in service with my family, knowing that I'm creating a legacy, a spiritual legacy, not just a financial legacy, but a spiritual legacy for my kids. Another symbol of success is when I'm around a table with my family and everybody's engaged and everybody's at peace and everybody's happy. That's another symbol of success. So for me, I have tried to be very careful to make sure that my worthy ideal, what I'm living for, again, is within that is family, is faith, is finances as well, but also fitness. If I'm so out of balance that I'm chasing a dollar so hard that I'm out of shape, then I might be chasing that dollar, but I'm getting slower and slower because I'm out of shape, and wealth is not wealth without health. We've got to have our health. So all of these areas have to be that. And again, if me chasing my dreams causes me not to be able to be a father to my kids, then it's not worth it. It's not
in vain.
It's not worthy of my life. Go ahead, Kevin.
I was just going to say it's in vain. I mean, if you have millions of dollars, but you have nobody to share that lifestyle with, what's the point?
That's right. It, it's a waste of time. It's a waste of your being alive, and it's short changes because whether we want to admit it or not, our destiny and our purpose is connected to the people that God has brought us into our life. When I make decisions, I think about how's this going to affect my family. I've got a great opportunity. I've had some great opportunities that I've said no to because it didn't fit my family vision. It didn't fit my, it would have been great 15 years ago, and it might be a great opportunity 15 years from now. But right now, where I'm at in life, I have to gauge every opportunity, every assignment with those alignments.
Well, and I think it comes back to the idea of like, what is your worthy ideal? Because again, not everybody's going to have the same picture of what that is. So whereas for one person who might listen, your worthy ideal might be a huge philanthropist, entrepreneur, and it could be to have huge net worth, so that you can, set your family up for generations and, bless other people. For somebody else, it might just be, I'm gonna make sure that I model a healthy marriage for my kids. I come from a broken home. It can be something like that. Both are equally important. Like neither one is more valuable than the other. Again, that goes back to, what is your value system. The other thing I've kind of learned, coming back to the question with balance, is I've learned this: there's really never a balance. I think the seesaw was a good analogy, because one of the things, like, I love people who take Bible out of context. And there's this misconstrued idea that if you become a Christian or a believer in Jesus, then life is supposed to be perfect. He actually promises the opposite if you read it. He says you're going to face tough times, tribulations, tests, trials. Like, you just might as well go ahead and get prepared, because it's coming. Now, that doesn't mean that there's never good times as well, but that's why I'm saying there's never really a perfect balance. But I think one of the things that can keep you spiritually and emotionally balanced or stable throughout all of those times is that there's a passage in Proverbs. It says, people make plans in their heart, but the Lord will be the one who orders their steps. And I think that falls into, even if you don't know Bible, there's a famous passage in the New Testament. Everybody loves to quote it out of context, especially for stuff like sports. It's, I can do all things through Christ, which strengthens me. Great verse, but people never use that in context. If you read that whole portion in context, what the Apostle Paul was saying is like, hey, I have been without, I've had no money, been broke as a joke, and I've had a lot of money. I've learned to be homeless. I've learned to have a really nice house, have all these material things, and have all these things working for me to where everything seems like it's on an up and not a low. But he says, like, I have learned to be spiritually and emotionally balanced through all of that. None of these things move me. Yeah. So I don't think there's ever circumstantially a balance with that. But I do think you can be to a place of health spiritually and emotionally where there is some stability to where none of these things move you. And again, I think that all comes back to, you have to be comfortable in your identity of who you're called to be, and you just have to have faith in that you are pursuing your worthy ideal, because otherwise, I mean, we already know there's not going to be balance, period, even on your own journey or in your own process to get to your worthy ideal, let alone it's going to be double trouble if you try to pursue somebody else's.
Yeah, and that's good. I think that's a great place to kind of. I think we'll definitely pick up this idea again next week, or this ideal again next week. There's so much to kick around when it comes to this, and I know, Cleo, you had probably a half a dozen more questions, but I'll say this to what you're saying. There's going to be, just like with the the Sistine Chapel, there's a lot of pain in the process. I mean, you're going to have it. The key to when you have a clear vision, or you have a purpose, or you have an idea, and and let me say this, you're not just going to go to bed and wake up tomorrow if you've never thought about this and just have all this, well, I'm going to write this down, this is going to be the roadmap for the rest of my life. It comes in pieces, it adapts, it evolves.
Yeah.
But I've kind of looked at it like a puzzle.
Yes.
Even where I'm at 46 years old, I think I've got the edges pretty much complete. I know where I'm headed, the general direction. I've got I know financial freedom is a big part for me because of the way I was raised, and also because the vocationally where God has placed me and called me to, that's my job. Khalil assists with that a lot, but we help people to find that, so I can't help people find what I haven't found, and you can't really put a number on freedom. You can't build a house and say that's freedom. You may have the nicest house in the neighborhood, but if it's no peace in that house, your kids don't respect you, your wife won't speak to you, you don't have freedom. You just have a nice house. And I want more than that. I want, that worthy ideal for me, it starts with freedom in the different areas, family, finances, fitness, faith. You hear me, say that a lot. But so if you're listening and you say, well, man, I have no clue. Well, guess okay. You got to start somewhere.
I was gonna say, John, one thing, like I would almost issue, and I know it's in the Kajabi, like the community, you have like challenges.
That's right.
People can do. I would say one thing I'm not a spiritual director by any means, but in like a lot of the like Catholic Church, when they hold services, they'll give an analogy like homilies, like it's a little lesson wrapped up in a picture, but then they would give you a meditation to take with you. So I would say one like meditational challenge for people to do who have listened in this, maybe you don't have any clear idea of what that is. I got the picture as you were talking as that you are going throughout life, you're painting a mosaic. So the challenge I would say is carve out some time, whether if it's a journal or if you prefer to type it. You're not going to have the full picture, but sit down, try and visualize. I know that freaks people out, but visualize the inspiration you are feeling, whether that's, for me, it would be from God. Try and see that in your imagination. And as the what is it? Habakkuk says, write the vision out so that the people who have it may run with it. Write that down and almost see yourself as a painter who your life or the process is the process of painting a masterpiece of a collage. Because collages, I don't know if you know what collages are, but it's a form of artwork where you have tons of different pictures. Y'all excuse my crazy dog running around. It's tons of miniature pictures put together to form a single piece of artwork. So you don't have to have all the pieces figured out now, but maybe you have some sort of idea of what your worthy ideal will look like. So the challenge would be, sit down, write these things out, type them out. If it's goals, I think that's a part of it. It's a piece, but something to write it down so that you at least have some direction in which you are heading on, instead of doing what we were talking about, casually letting go of restraint and spiraling out. And it'll keep you on track. But I think that's a good exercise for people just to try to start. It's a starting point.
Well, why don't we do that? And one thing about the podcast are very informal, and for the listeners, I'll just kind of tell you, a lot of what we discuss on the podcast, we get into more detail within the community, King's Table. So I'm going to plug it just a little bit, guys. If you're listening to the podcast and you want to dive deeper, just from this conversation, we're gonna go in and put an assignment to kind of talk about that, to get that started. Because I'll tell you this. I heard this 7 years ago from Earl Nightingale, and it probably took me a year, probably a good 12 months to actually put this together and actually form this worthy ideal for myself. And it changed a lot over that year. I actually had something down on paper within about a week, but it evolved and developed so much. And every 12 months now I've gone back, and I usually do this around December. Yeah. And I just, I put, just like Kaylin said, I mean, it's a mosaic, it's what we're creating. So get into the community, guys. Sign up. I encourage you to. These discussions are crucial, and sign up. It's very affordable. We actually come live and actually dissect these talks, and actually, we could spend weeks on what is a worthy ideal and how do we get toward that. But we want to follow this up with practical steps. Once you have that, okay, if success is the progressive realization of a worthy ideal, now that we have this worthy ideal, what we'll give the rest of our life for, talk about the steps that helps us to progressively, piece by piece, realize this idea. We want to realize this purpose and this goal and this destiny that we have on our lives. And what are the steps that we take toward that? And Khalil had brought up, how do we measure it and all of these different things. I want to talk about that. So we'll be back next week for that. Join our King's Table community. You can go, I know it's on in Instagram. The link is in my bio. You can go to John Tanner Coaching. There's a page there. You can find, Kaylin on Instagram, Facebook. We'll get the link for him so he can share that with you. But, thanks, guys, for being on here with me today. And thanks for all you guys that joined us. And until next time, we'll see you next time on King's Table Podcast.